On paper, the Hungarian Grand Prix had all the ingredients for an instant classic. Saturday gave us one of the most breathtaking qualifying sessions in modern Formula One history. The final shootout, Q3, was the tightest ever recorded. 4 drivers, 4 different cars, all separated by less than a single tenth of a second for pole position. It was electric, unpredictable, and a perfect showcase of driver skill on the absolute limit. Then came Sunday. The race for the win came down to the final few laps, a tense duel between the 2 championship leaders, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, each on a completely different strategy. It was a high-stakes gamble that went right down to the wire. So we had a historic qualifying and a last-lap battle for the victory. Sounds amazing, right? And yet, something felt off. I have to be honest, despite the suspense, the race itself was a profound disappointment. It felt like we're witnessing the endgame of a complicated set of regulations, where simply going racing has become incredibly difficult. The stark contrast between the thrill of qualifying and the reality of the race was jarring. This weekend was a paradox. It was a thrilling strategic masterpiece and at the same time a worrying sign that modern Formula One might be facing a fundamental problem. A problem where the most exciting part of the weekend is the stopwatch, and the race itself has become a 70-lap chess match where the cars can barely follow each other, let alone fight. So what really happened in Hungary? How did one driver win a race he never looked likely to control? How did a miracle pole position dissolve into a 4th place finish? And how did the most dominant team on the grid get it so wrong? Today, we're breaking down the strategic masterstroke, the heartbreaking damage, and the accidental victory that defined the Hungarian Grand Prix. This is the story of how the race was won, not on the track, but in the shadows. Before we dive into the team-by-team drama, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, the state of racing itself. The Hungarian Grand Prix laid bare a frustrating truth about the current generation of F1 cars. Overtaking has become excruciatingly difficult. The Hungaroring has never been known for its long straights and easy passing opportunities, but this was different. We saw cars with a pace advantage of over a second and a half per lap get stuck, unable to even launch a serious attack. Drivers were forced to back off, managing their tires from 2 or 3 seconds behind, knowing that getting any closer would just cook their rubber for no reward. This reality has shifted the entire balance of a Grand Prix weekend. Qualifying is no longer just about getting a good starting spot. It has become the most decisive session of the entire event. Your Saturday result dictates an enormous portion of your Sunday outcome because the race has become a procession. Drivers are often locked into the positions they hold after the first lap, and their only hope of moving forward comes from the roll of the dice in the pit lane. The first stint was a perfect example, with a 15-car DRS train where no one could make a move unless they had a pace delta of nearly 2 seconds. Even the strategy has become predictable. On a track known for being abrasive, a one-stop was still the optimal choice, a testament to how durable modern tires are. This isn't to say there was no drama. The tension was in the strategy, the whispers over the radio, the gambles on pit timing. But it was a cerebral fight, a battle of numbers and windows, not of late braking and wheel-to-wheel combat. And as we're about to see, in a race this tight, sometimes the winning move is the one you're forced to make by accident. Coming into the weekend, everyone knew McLaren was in a league of their own. On a circuit with medium-speed corners and a high emphasis on tire management, especially the rears, the MCL35 was simply untouchable. In one stint with clean air, their drivers pulled out a 15 to 20 second gap on their nearest rival. The team had won 9 of the last 11 races and was on a streak of 4 consecutive 1-2 finishes. The question wasn't if a McLaren would win, but which one. And yet, for all that dominance, they once again let pole position slip through their fingers. A sudden drop in temperature and a change in wind direction during Q3 unsettled the car just enough to erase their advantage. Both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri drove, in the words of team principal Andrea Stella, a little too cautiously. Piastri failed to improve on his final run, and Norris, after a mistake on his first attempt, couldn't beat his teammate on the second. They were playing it safe for the championship, and it opened the door for a surprise pole sitter. On Sunday, it seemed like business as usual would resume. At the start, however, Charles Leclerc got a better launch than Piastri. Norris tried to sweep around the outside, but his teammate closed the door, forcing him to back off. This hesitation allowed George Russell and Fernando Alonso to sneak past, and just like that, Lando was down to 5th. Up front, Piastri quickly realized he couldn't pass Leclerc on track, even with a much faster car. He settled in about 3 seconds behind to protect his tires, waiting for the pit stops. Norris was similarly stuck behind Russell. The race was going to be decided in the pits, but it didn't unfold the way anyone, especially Piastri, expected. The drama began around lap 9. The team started realizing the tire degradation was much lower than anticipated. A one-stop strategy, previously thought impossible, was now on the table. On the radio, Norris complained his tires were completely cooked and even seemed to agree with a suggestion to pit 5 laps earlier than planned. It sounded like a classic two-stop was inevitable for him. But then, just a lap or two later, on lap 18, it was Piastri who dived into the pits. This was the logical move. The undercut, pitting earlier to get the benefit of fresh tires, was proving to be incredibly powerful, worth almost 2 seconds. Piastri's fight was with Leclerc, who was holding him up. This was his best chance to leapfrog the Ferrari. Crucially, the team had asked Piastri for his opinion, and he chose to pit early to try and get past Leclerc, committing himself to what everyone assumed would be a two-stop race. This single move, however, sealed his fate. Because Piastri pitted on lap 18, Norris couldn't come in. The team can only service one car at a time. On lap 19, Leclerc and Russell pitted to cover off Piastri. If Norris had pitted with them, he would have emerged right behind Russell again, trapped for another 30 laps. He had no choice but to stay out. This is where the conspiracy theories began. Did Norris bluff about his tires being dead to trick Piastri into pitting first? The answer is almost certainly no. Norris himself admitted he was pushed onto the one-stop strategy by default. He was stuck, burning up his tires and had nothing to lose. But once he was given clean air, everything changed. The McLaren came alive. His tires, freed from the turbulent air of the cars ahead, found a second win. And slowly, lap by lap, the team realized that the one-stop wasn't just a desperate gamble anymore. It was the winning strategy. It gave him the ultimate weapon in modern F1. Track position. While Piastri was still stuck behind Leclerc after his first stop, Norris extended his opening stint by a massive 13 laps. He then managed his hard tires brilliantly for the final 40 laps of the race. Once Piastri finally cleared Leclerc at the second round of stops, thanks to a clever counter call from his engineers, he unleashed the true pace of his car and hunted down his teammate. He was significantly faster on tires that were 13 laps younger. But as we saw all day, passing was another story. Even with a huge advantage, and in an identical car, it was impossible. He got close, forcing a small heart-and-mouth moment from Norris that was a near copy of their battle in Austria, but the leader had the track position, and that was all that mattered. Piastri himself admitted that even with 10 more laps, an overtake was unlikely. This situation highlights the fascinating papaya rules at McLaren. The two sides of the garage are allowed to pursue their own strategies to beat each other. It creates incredible entertainment, but it can also lead to controversy. The McLaren driver, who was in the better position for most of the race, lost because of a strategy created by the other side of the garage. There was nothing intentional, but it shows the inherent risk of their approach. While McLaren was dealing with its internal battle, Ferrari was living through a weekend of soaring highs and crushing lows personified by its two drivers. The undisputed star of Saturday was Charles Leclerc. On Friday, he had established himself as the best of the rest behind the McLarens, but in qualifying, the SF25 suddenly became a handful and he barely scraped through to Q3. Then in the final session, a perfect storm of factors aligned. The changing wind and cooler temperatures that hurt McLaren seemed to bother the already difficult Ferrari less. Other drivers made small mistakes. Leclerc, at his request, was given a perfect track position to prepare his lap. The engine, which has had issues this year, was performing flawlessly, and then he delivered a moment of pure magic. In the final corner, he uses exceptional technique to carry a breath of throttle where others couldn't, finding the precious thousandths of a second needed to snatch a sensational pole position. It was a stunning achievement, but also a reminder of how fine the margins were. Just 54 thousandths of a second separated him from being fourth. On Sunday, he did his job perfectly at the start, holding the lead. For the first part of the race, he defended flawlessly from the much faster McLaren of Piastri. From the cockpit, there was nothing more he could have done, and yet he finished fourth, drenched in frustration. So what went wrong? Did Ferrari throw away a victory? The answer is complicated, but it boils down to two separate issues: strategy and damage. Strategically, Leclerc was a victim of the same circumstances as Piastri. When Piastri pitted on lap 18 to attempt the undercut, Ferrari had to react. They covered him off the very next lap, ensuring Leclerc would emerge from the pits still in the lead. At that moment, it was the only logical move to make to protect his position against his most immediate threat. But in doing so, they committed him to a two-stop strategy, unknowingly handing the advantage to the one-stopping Lando Norris. From that point on, his shot at victory was gone. But what cost him a podium was something far more mysterious. Around lap 40, his car began to suffer from significant damage to the chassis. By the end of the race, he was losing up to 2 seconds per lap. This problem not only destroyed his pace, but also created immense confusion. On the radio, Leclerc was furious. He initially blamed the performance drop on a front wing adjustment made during his pit stop, telling the team, "We are going to lose the race. I told you to listen to me." After the race, however, he admitted his radio messages were meaningless because he didn't know about the chassis damage at the time. The team has been worryingly vague about what exactly failed. Theories have emerged, supported by several knowledgeable sources and even George Russell, that it was related to the car's floor plank. The team may have asked him to change engine modes and then made setup changes during the stop to raise the car's ride height, all to avoid excessive wear and a potential disqualification, similar to what happened in China. Whatever the cause, it was a catastrophic failure that turned a potential second-place finish into a distant fourth. And as dramatic as Leclerc's day was, it was still miles better than his teammates. Lewis Hamilton's weekend was a nightmare, though perhaps not as big of a disaster as the raw results suggest. He was, as has often been the case this season, about 2/10 off Leclerc's pace, struggling with the car's balance and unpredictable nature. When he was eliminated in Q2, he was only a 1/10.5 behind his teammate, and just 15 thousandths of a second from making it into Q3. The problem was, in that same session, the track conditions shifted, and Leclerc went on to take pole. This made Hamilton's P12 look catastrophic, but his actual performance gap to his teammate wasn't unusual for him this season. His post-qualifying comments were brutally honest, bordering on defeatist, saying he was useless and that the team should change the driver. While the emotion is understandable, it was an exaggeration. He was in his usual performance window. It's just that the circumstances around him made that window look like a chasm. His race was doomed from the start. The team put him on the hard tires, a strategic gamble that backfired completely. He lost positions on the opening lap to cars on softer, grippier tires and found himself stuck in 14th place in the DRS train. He couldn't make progress, and he couldn't pit early because his strategy required him to go long. By the time he finally made his stop, his race was over. He would ultimately finish outside the points, a painful end to a weekend that spiraled out of control from a deficit of just a few tenths of a second. While Ferrari was imploding, their old rivals at Mercedes were quietly finding their footing again. The team made a crucial decision before the weekend. They removed the new rear suspension they had been developing. The upgrade, while theoretically faster, had made the car's behavior unpredictable. By taking a step back to a known configuration, they found a stable platform, and the drivers immediately regained their confidence. George Russell was the star of the show. On Saturday, he was just 53 thousandths of a second off pole and felt he let it slip with a small mistake in the second sector. On Sunday, his race pace was solid. He was only 7 seconds behind Piastri and Leclerc after 50 laps, proving the Mercedes was genuinely competitive. He, like Leclerc and Piastri, was on the logical two-stop strategy, and when Leclerc's Ferrari started to fail, George was perfectly placed to pick up the pieces and claim another podium. It was a discreet but perfectly executed weekend, a hallmark of his season so far. His rookie teammate Kimi Antonelli took home only a single point, but the result doesn't tell the whole story. This was a significant step forward for the young Italian. He looked much more comfortable in the car and had the pace for Q3 before a mistake on his final lap, where he lost the rear and ran wide, consigned him to a Q2 exit. In the race, he drove a smart and mature race, making a very long 50-lap final stint on the hard tires work to secure 10th place. It was a gritty drive that showed real promise. After a difficult stretch, this weekend was an encouraging sign that he is starting to get to grips with the car and the immense pressure of Formula One. If Mercedes found a glimmer of hope, Red Bull plunged into darkness. This was, without a doubt, their worst weekend of the season. A performance reminiscent of their nightmares in Singapore last year. From the very first practice session, the car was nowhere. It had no grip, no balance, and was terrible on its tires. It was an amplification of all the issues the team has been fighting all year, but this time, they had no answers. Pierre Wache, the technical director, admitted that nothing they tried worked and that the team was essentially lost. This time, there was no magic turnaround from Max Verstappen. He had to fight just to make it into Q3, where he qualified a shocking 8th. In the race, after losing a place at the start, he quickly repassed Lawson and Stroll, but then got stuck. He was one of the first in the top 10 to pit, a move that backfired as it dropped him into traffic, ruined his tires, and forced him into a second stop. He spent the entire final stint staring at the gearbox of Alex Albon's Williams, unable to pass, and came home in 9th place. To put that in perspective, this was arguably Verstappen's worst finish on pure pace since he was driving for Toro Rosso back in 2016. Every other poor result in the years since has come with an asterisk, a crash, a penalty, a mechanical failure. This time, he was just slow. It was a stunning and deeply worrying performance from the reigning champions. His teammate Yuki Tsunoda continued his run of frustrating luck. He was impressively close to Verstappen in qualifying, twice within 0.2 in Q1, but was eliminated simply because the car was that bad. He was then forced to start from the pit lane due to engine component changes, making a points finish impossible. It's another weekend where he showed flashes of strong performance that were completely invisible in the final result. Elsewhere in the midfield, the big winners were Aston Martin. After being on the last row of the grid at the previous race, they bounced back in spectacular fashion. The tight, high downforce nature of the Hungaroring suited their car perfectly. They also made a smart decision to revert to an older floor specification that worked better. The result was a massive 16-point haul. Fernando Alonso qualified a brilliant 5th, though he was left with the small regret of missing out on a potential pole position after a slight mistake on his final lap, where he had been ahead of Leclerc's pace for 2/3 of the lap. In the race, he drove flawlessly to secure the best of the rest title. The team also learned from past mistakes, specifically in Imola. Instead of pitting early and getting stuck in traffic, they patiently executed a one-stop strategy, letting Verstappen fall into that trap instead. It was a strategic masterclass that lifted them to 6th in the constructors' standings. The other standout was Sauber's Gabriel Bortoleto. The rookie was sensational, putting half a second on his veteran teammate in Q1, reaching Q3 for the 3rd consecutive time and qualifying 7th ahead of Verstappen. He converted that into an 8th place finish, continuing his excellent recent run of form. It was a more difficult weekend for the Racing Bulls and Alpine. Isaac Hadjar of Racing Bulls had the pace for a great result but missed out on a top 8 grid spot after a mistake in Q3, partly because he opted not to do an initial run on used tires and was caught out by the changing conditions. This ultimately cost him points in a race where track position was everything. At Alpine, both drivers were out-qualified by their teammates and struggled with a car that appears to be one of the slowest on the grid. So how does all this shake up the championship picture? In the driver's standings, the fight at the top is getting even closer. Lando Norris's victory closes the gap to his teammate Oscar Piastri to just 9 points. With 6 wins to Piastri's 5, this title fight looks set to go down to the very last race. Behind them, the battle for 3rd is heating up with George Russell and Charles Leclerc closing in on a struggling Max Verstappen. In the Constructors' Championship, McLaren now holds a colossal 299-point lead over Ferrari, who have 260 points in total. The real fight is for 2nd place, where Mercedes is now breathing down Ferrari's neck. Red Bull is stuck in 4th, while Aston Martin's big weekend allows them to leapfrog Sauber for 6th place. At the bottom, Haas and Alpine remain 9th and 10th, a fair reflection of their performance so far this season. So, what is the final verdict on the Hungarian Grand Prix? It was a race that will be remembered more for its strategic intrigue than its on-track spectacle. It was a tense, fascinating puzzle that rewarded patience, precision, and a little bit of luck. But it also served as a stark reminder of how difficult wheel-to-wheel racing has become in Formula One. Now, for our final debrief, here are our top 5 performers of the weekend. Number 5. Lando Norris. It was a victory born from circumstance, but he managed the one-stop strategy to perfection under immense pressure. Number 4. Fernando Alonso. A near-perfect weekend, maximizing the potential of the Aston Martin to claim best of the rest and lead the team's strategic masterclass. Number 3. Gabriel Bortoleto. Another stunning qualifying performance from the rookie, backed up by a clean and mature drive to a fantastic 8th place finish. Number 2. George Russell. He extracted nearly everything from the improved Mercedes, narrowly missing pole and driving a flawless race to capitalize on others' misfortune for a well-deserved podium. Number 1. Charles Leclerc. Despite the heartbreaking result, his Saturday pole lap was a work of art. On Sunday, he did everything right from the cockpit, only to be denied a certain podium by strategy and a cruel mechanical failure. It was a champion's drive without the reward. And that brings us to the end of our debrief. Now we head into the summer break, a chance for the teams and drivers to rest, reset, and analyze before the championship fight resumes. But I want to know what you think. Was the Hungarian Grand Prix a strategic classic or a boring procession saved by the pit stops? Who was your driver of the day? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more F1 analysis when we return from the break. We'll see you then.